There's something almost nobody talks about openly when it comes to family. Not because it's forbidden, not because it's wrong to think about it, but because there's a silent pressure, a pressure you learned since you were a kid, that says you're obligated to open your door to anyone who carries the same blood as you. And that questioning that makes you unloving, ungrateful, weak, that pressure costs a lot. Because there are people who come into your house smiling, sit in your living room, have coffee in your kitchen, and when they leave, the house feels different, heavier, quieter, with a kind of exhaustion you can't quite explain because technically nothing happened. Nobody fought, nobody said anything wrong, but something changed, and you feel it. In this video, you're going to identify 8 types of family members that the Bible named a long time ago, directly, without softening it. This isn't about creating conflict. It's not about cutting off family on impulse. It's about finally having the clarity to see what's happening inside your own home before it destroys your peace in a way that'll take you a very long time to recover from. I know what this feels like because I've lived it. There was someone in my family I'd see regularly. No obvious problem, no open conflict. But after every visit, something would stay behind. A weight that wasn't physical. A tiredness with no clear explanation, a feeling that the house had shifted in some way. It took me a long time to admit what was right in front of me. I kept blaming other things. I kept opening the door. What I'm going to show you in this video are 8 real patterns that the Bible already described, and that show up inside families way more often than people have the courage to admit. And the most dangerous one on this list isn't the one you've already identified. It's not the family member who's already caused you open conflict, the one you already know drains you. The most dangerous one looks completely different, and they show up at the bottom of this list. Pay attention to this. We were taught from a young age that family is sacred, and I believe that. But there's a confusion that costs a lot. The confusion between family values and unconditional obligation. The obligation to open your door to anyone just because they share your last name. Your home is not a neutral space. It's the environment where you rest, where you pray, where you try to be who you want to be away from the eyes of the world. It carries real spiritual weight. Proverbs 17 says it's better to have a dry crust with peace than a house full of feasting with conflict. That's not a metaphor. That's practical wisdom about what you let in. This ranking was built on 3 things I've observed over years of studying human behavior, reading the scriptures, and listening to stories from people who've been through this, and that in many cases I've been through myself. The first criterion is the real spiritual impact on the environment. The second is how long it takes for the damage to show up. And the third, and maybe the most important, is how hard it is to realize that that presence is destroying something inside your home. We're going from least destructive to most dangerous, and I'll warn you now, what shows up at the bottom of this list still has something important to teach. There is no position on this list that's harmless enough to ignore. The 8th type on this ranking is the family member who turns every visit into an emotional dumping session. Not aggressive, doesn't create open conflict, they just show up loaded and unload. Life isn't going well. The people around them keep letting them down. Plans didn't work out, and every conversation, without you fully realizing it, keeps getting pulled toward the weight they brought with them. They're in last place because of the 3rd criterion I mentioned, how long it takes for the damage to appear. In this case, the damage shows up fast. You feel it while it's happening. After they leave, you can name where the exhaustion came from. And when you can name it, you still have the ability to create protection. That's what puts this type in the lowest position. Not because the impact is light, but because it's still within your field of vision. What they do to the atmosphere of your home is install a spirit of complaint. Philippians 2 says, "Do everything without grumbling." And grumbling, in the original context, isn't neutral. It contaminates the environment around it. After a few hours with this family member, you start seeing your own life with less gratitude than you had before. You don't notice in the moment. You notice later, when you try to pray and the energy just isn't there anymore. Anyone who has this kind of family member and still keeps regular contact, usually out of a sense of obligation, out of sympathy, or because they still believe they can help, is going to recognize this weight. It's real. And the Bible doesn't ask you to carry it indefinitely. The next type is even quieter. The damage doesn't show up during the visit. It shows up days later when you're still trying to figure out why something changed when nothing obvious had happened. The seventh type on this ranking is the silent, envious family member. And this is where things start to shift. Type 8 you feel while it's happening. This one you don't feel in the moment. The visit goes normally, sometimes even well. There's conversation, there's laughter, there appears to be a healthy relationship, and when they leave, you can't identify what happened. You just notice days later that something feels different, a thought that wasn't there before, an insecurity that came out of nowhere, a comparison you didn't used to make, and now you do. That's exactly what puts them above type 8 by the second criterion, how long it takes for the damage to appear. The silent, envious person doesn't complain, they observe. They look at your home with an attention that seems like interest, but it isn't interest, it's evaluation. They compare what you have with what they have and what they carry internally. Because of that, ends up leaking in ways you'll hardly be able to prove. A comment that sounds like a compliment but actually diminishes you. A question about something of yours that didn't need to be asked. A silence at the moment you were expecting a genuine reaction. Proverbs 14 says, "Envy is rottenness in the bones." That's not poetic exaggeration. It's a description of a real mechanism. Envy destroys from the inside whoever carries it, and whoever stays too close ends up being contaminated by the emotional instability it generates. You don't leave the visit knowing what happened. You leave with something planted inside you. People who have this type of family member in their lives usually take years to identify the pattern, because the envious type rarely exposes themselves in obvious ways. They learn to operate within the boundaries of what's acceptable. And it's that ability to stay invisible that makes the damage so hard to name. You can still create protection against this type, but it already requires more discernment than the previous one. You have to stop observing what they say and start observing what you feel after they leave. The next type removes yet another layer of visibility. Starting from type 6, the damage begins to operate inside your own decisions, not just your emotional state. The sixth type on this ranking is the gossip in the family. And this is where the game really changes. This isn't just one step above type 7, it's a turning point. Because the first two types I analyzed, the one who unloads and the one who envies, operate inside your home. The damage stays inside you. It's emotional, it's spiritual, but it's still internal. The gossip operates outside. What comes through your door goes out through their mouth. What you said in the privacy of your living room about your life, your marriage, your problems, your wins, becomes a topic in someone else's house, with other family members, with people you also know, who now know things you never authorized to be shared. Proverbs 20 is direct. Don't associate with a gossip. That's not a suggestion. It's an instruction. And the reason isn't just that gossip is annoying to hear. It's that the gossip destroys what you can't protect. Your reputation, your privacy, the trust people place in you without knowing you're being monitored by someone who's going to talk. This is where the criterion of spiritual impact moves up a level. The previous types hurt what happens inside you. This one hurts what happens between you and the people around you. Relationships that took years to build can be damaged by a conversation that happened in your living room without you ever knowing you were being observed with the intent to report. The pattern usually stays invisible for a long time because the gossip rarely seems like a gossip to your face. They're warm, interested, present. They ask questions, they listen closely, they show they care. The problem is, you're confusing curiosity with care. And the difference between the two only shows up when the information comes back to you through a different channel. If I had to point to the type on this list that most people ignore the longest, it would be this one. Not because it's hard to imagine, but because it's hard to accept. Because it's usually someone you like, someone you feel like you can talk to. That limitation is what keeps them in 6th place on this ranking. You can still identify the pattern once the damage comes back around. It takes time, but it gets there. The next 3 types operate differently. Their damage rarely comes back, it just stays inside the home, inside the people who live there, without you being able to trace exactly where it came from. The fifth type on this ranking is the emotional manipulator in the family. And I need to be honest, this one almost came in first. If you've been following the ranking up to this point, you've seen the pattern of analysis grow. Type 8 you feel and can name. Type 7 you feel afterward but still notice. Type 6 comes back to you through the path the information travels. They all have one thing in common. At some point, the damage becomes visible. The emotional manipulator operates where you can't trace it. They operate inside your own decisions. Not aggressive. Doesn't raise their voice. In most cases, they seem like the exact opposite. They seem like someone who cares deeply. They use care as a language and guilt as a tool. When you set a boundary with them, they don't resist head-on. They suffer. They go quiet in a way that weighs on you. They tell other family members that you've changed, that you're different now, that something happened to you. And suddenly you're explaining yourself, not to them, but to everyone around you, over a decision that was yours and that you had every right to make. Proverbs 26 describes this pattern with striking precision. He who hates disguises it with his lips, but in his heart he stores up deceit. Though his speech is charming, do not believe him. The problem isn't what they say. It's what they move inside you after they leave. You don't leave the visit with a conflict. You leave with an emotional debt that was never negotiated, never consented to, and that will show up in your decisions over the next few days. It'll show up when you should say no and can't, when you open the door again even knowing you shouldn't. By the criterion of how hard it is to recognize the damage, this type is at the absolute limit, because their damage never looks like damage. It looks like love that wasn't returned. And a lot of people I respect get stuck in this cycle for years without being able to name what's happening. The only thing stopping me from putting this type in first place is one thing, one subtle difference. But once you understand it, it'll completely change how you read this topic. The fourth type on this ranking is the sower of discord. They don't come into your home to attack you directly. They come to divide. And they do it through conversations that, on the surface, seem harmless. A subtle observation about your spouse that plants a small doubt. A comment about how you're raising your kids disguised as advice. A story about another relative that silently positions you against them. The sower of discord works in the cracks of your relationships. By the time you realize what happened, the environment is already contaminated and the division is already done. Proverbs 6 lists 7 things God hates, and one of them is exactly this: sowing conflict among brothers. This isn't a small mistake. It's something God detests because it destroys the unity of the place that's supposed to be your refuge. The third type is the uninvited advisor, that family member who feels entitled to give their opinion about your marriage, your finances, and your choices simply because they share your blood. They believe that family closeness gives them automatic authority over your life. The damage they cause is subtle because at first it doesn't feel invasive. It feels like care. It feels like the voice of experience. But pay attention to the pattern. Over time, you start to notice that every visit ends with you questioning decisions that were already at peace before they knocked on your door. Proverbs 17 warns that even a fool, when silent, is considered wise. The uninvited advisor is never silent. They fill your home with noise, and the silence they should have kept turns into confusion inside your own head after they leave. In second place, we have the spiritually corrupt. And here I'm asking for real discernment, not religious prejudice or surface-level judgment. I'm talking about that family member who is actively involved in practices that mix spirituality with what the Bible calls darkness. It could be syncretism, occultism, or even a kind of religiosity that seems harmless on the surface, but carries principles that are completely opposed to the gospel. 2 Corinthians chapter 6 asks a direct question that a lot of people prefer to ignore. What fellowship can light have with darkness? Your home is your protective environment. When this family member walks in, they don't just bring their physical presence. They bring the weight of what they're in communion with out there. And in the spiritual realm, what comes through your door is not neutral. And yet, none of them is type 1. Type 1 is the family member who seems like a saint. Pay close attention here. It's not the one who complains. It's not the envious one. Not the gossip, not the emotional manipulator. It's the family member who walks into your home quoting scripture, who talks about God fluently, who has the outward appearance of someone spiritually aligned, who uses the language of faith as their entry pass. And you open the door because you assume that whoever speaks like that is carrying the same thing they're speaking. This one is the most dangerous of the 8. Every previous type operates with tools that you can identify at some point: exhaustion, envy, gossip, manipulation, discord. These are recognizable human patterns, sometimes hard to name but recognizable. Type 1 operates with a different tool, the appearance of spirituality, and that appearance disarms your discernment before the visit even begins. You don't go in on guard. You open up, you share, you trust. Because the language is familiar, the scriptures are real, and the tone is one of spiritual care. But underneath all of that, there's judgment. There's control. There's an undeclared agenda that's going to operate inside your home, inside your marriage, inside your faith, in a way that'll take you a long time to separate from what God is actually speaking over your life. Matthew 7 is too precise to ignore here. Jesus wasn't talking about obvious enemies when he said, "Watch out for wolves in sheep's clothing." He was talking about presences that arrive with the right appearance and the wrong intention. That exists inside families. It always has. What puts this type at the top by the criterion of spiritual impact is exactly this. They don't just drain your peace. They contaminate your relationship with God. They plant doubt about what you're building. They use the Bible to place you in a position of guilt that God never placed you in. And because they use spiritual language, you spend months unable to distinguish what came from God and what came from them. Let me show you exactly how this works on the inside. The question that stays with you after learning about these 8 types is always the same. Why? Why would a family member do this? Why would someone who shares the same family, the same history, sometimes the same upbringing, walk into your home and operate this way? The answer isn't malice, it's emptiness. The Bible describes with precision what happens to a person who never dealt with what's inside them. Proverbs 14 says, "A tranquil heart gives life to the body, but envy is rottenness in the bones." That's not poetic metaphor, it's the description of a real mechanism. Whoever carries envy isn't okay. Whoever sows discord isn't at peace. Whoever manipulates emotionally doesn't have inner clarity. Whoever uses spiritual language to control is, at their core, trying to fill an authority they don't actually have. The problem is that a person's emptiness never stays just in them. It looks for space. It looks for an environment. It looks for people who haven't yet realized what's happening. And your home, with your routine, your peace, your life, is exactly the kind of environment that attracts that emptiness as a contrast. Because where there's light, what's in the dark notices the difference. That doesn't mean you need to turn compassion into naivety. Jesus had compassion for the Pharisees and still called them whitewashed tombs. Paul had love for the church and still instructed people to avoid certain individuals with surgical clarity. 2 Timothy 3 describes types of people who should be avoided, and the list is uncomfortably familiar. Lovers of self, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, without natural affection. Paul wasn't describing declared enemies. He was describing people who show up with an appearance of godliness but deny its power. An appearance of godliness, denying its power. That exists inside families. It always has. And the biblical instruction isn't to be more patient with these presences. It's to keep away from them. Understanding why these family members operate this way isn't an excuse to keep opening the door. It's the clarity to stop feeling guilty for protecting what you've built. Protecting your home isn't starting a war. It's not cutting off family on impulse. It's not acting with coldness or building walls the Bible never asked you to build. It's discernment, and discernment is different from judgment. Judgment condemns. Discernment observes, evaluates, and protects. Jesus instructed, "Be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves." That's not a contradiction. It's balance. You can be kind to a person and still not open your home to them. You can love a family member from a distance without letting them operate inside your environment. The first thing that changes when you start applying real discernment is your standard for access. Access isn't the same as relationship. You can maintain a civil relationship with a family member and still not give them access to your routine, your decisions, your private conversations, the environment where your kids are growing up. That's not cruelty, that's responsibility. Proverbs 4 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." The heart here isn't just your inner world, it's the center from which your life is organized, and your home is part of that. The second thing that changes is how you read what you're feeling. When a visit ends and the house feels different, heavier, quieter, with an exhaustion that has no name, that's information. That's not weakness. That's not just an impression. That's your discernment working. The problem is that most people have learned to ignore that signal because of family pressure, guilt, fear of seeming ungrateful. Start treating that signal as real data. The third thing is understanding that distance isn't abandonment. You are not responsible for fixing anyone's emptiness. You can pray for a family member. You can genuinely hope they're doing well. You can want to see them transformed and still not receive them in your home while the pattern doesn't change. That doesn't contradict Christian love. Christian love doesn't require you to destroy yourself to prove you care. Your home carries spiritual weight. What enters it influences what happens inside it. That's not superstition. It's a biblical principle that runs from the Old Testament to the New. And protecting that environment isn't optional for anyone who takes their faith seriously. It sounds like too much to care this way, but it isn't. Think about it.